Welcome back. In this video, we're going to look at scope. Now, if you watched the previous video on scope, this is replacing it. I just think that this is a slightly better example. This video on scope won't focus on functions at all. We might come back to that later, but the same principles apply with functions. So we've got a bit of code here. Now, this is very similar to what you did in Lab 2. Except a couple of things. So we've got this if statement here and also this here. So you would have had the whole heap of if statements. It's just been put into some ternary operations. This isn't actually very good. It's just to save space on the screen because the code's very long with it, and for the examples, I don't really care about that part. So I've just squished it up into some ternary operators just to make it easier to read, but this isn't actually very good. It's actually pretty slow and not very readable. So the if, else if is actually better there, but this is just there for the example. So I just wanted to make note of that because I don't want you to get in the practice of doing that. All right, so we've got our code. It looks fairly similar. You'll notice that I put these green lines here just to indicate where the two braces match up with each other. This is important and everything's indented. And you'll see how indentation helps with scope as well in this video. So first things first, we're going to have a look at main. Okay. Now, we talk about the scope of main being from this brace all the way down to this brace. Okay? It means that if something's declared within these two braces and not within any other two braces, then it will exist from the point it's declared right to the end of main. Okay? So, for example, here we have these three variables, hue, saturation, lightness in. They're all declared from this line all the way down to the bottom here. Meaning that I can access them at any point of time and I need to be wary of them at all points of time. So I know that these can change at any point, so I need to be especially careful with these variables. Now, with these, you'll notice that after it follows the prompts for the user to enter the values and the scans to get the values from the user. Now, at this point in the code, we only have three variables. This is good because it means that I can't accidentally use something that I didn't mean to use. It means that I know what's the important variables at this stage, and if I forget to use one, I will also be aware that I have accidentally, let's say, used saturation in twice or something like that, because if I do a compile here, it will tell me that I have an unused variable. So by declaring it here, I can validate just this very small amount of code with these three variables because at this stage they're all that matters, and the compiler's there to help me to know that I'm doing this section correct and I won't have to worry about it later. We continue from there and we get to this if else. Now the if here is just checking if the user entered an invalid value for one of these entries, and if they did, it just says incorrect value, please run the program again, and it will just skip everything and go straight to the return. Okay, and end the program. But if the user did enter a correct value, we get to this else. Now, with our if and else, we get the added benefit of them adding their own scope. So between here and here, if now anything's declared between these braces, but not within any other braces, they will exist all the way up to this brace. So take, for example, saturation. From the point it's declared, it will exist all the way down to here. On the next line, lightness will exist from here down to here. Okay, meaning that I now have 5 variables to worry about. Okay, so I now have oops, that's not what I meant to do. I now have 5 variables to worry about at this point. Okay, which adds to the complexity, but I still don't have to worry about those two up here. Okay, so I've made it easier up here for myself because I don't have saturation and lightness up here. If I declared these at the top, it adds to the complexity of this, and it adds more chance for errors, and it also reduces readability because someone who's reading this can quickly see that saturation is not needed here. And so they don't need to go into the code and look for it and see how it's used. They can just see that it's here. And so from the reader's perspective, they know that it's going to be used somewhere below here. Okay, and they can quickly see, oh, there's saturation, there's lightness. So continuing from here, we can also see float C is, well, C as a float also is in a similar boat, and it will exist to the end of this else statement. And X is also one of these variables, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you can see that these are all declared at different points, but they all cease to exist at this brace here. Now, this means that as my program grows, I'm going to get more and more variables that I have to deal with. 7, 8, 9, 10, and 13. Okay, so at this stage here, it's the most complex with terms of variables. We've got 13 variables to deal with, but the combination of them makes these red, green, and blue, and we can see that relationship quite clearly. But if we continued the program later, what we might do is move these to another scope or move these out somehow, such that we can reduce some of these other ones that we don't need for later on. Okay, but it also helps because it means that at this stage, when we're at, let's say, X, I know what is declared and what I need, and I don't accidentally use some of these output ones that I need later or do my maths backwards. So by working down, in terms of the code firstly, because we know that it executes down the page, but also in terms of the variables, I don't need these till now, so I'll declare them here so I don't accidentally use them up here. The compiler will tell me off if I use something that shouldn't be used yet. So by declaring them in order, I make sure that my code is safe. Now, from here, you'll also notice a couple more braces. Now, these first sets of braces here are a little bit more interesting. So we've got some braces here and here. Now, what you'll notice about these, compared to anything you've done before, is there's no if, there's no while, there's no do while, there's no for loop before these braces. I've just put these braces in myself. Now, you can do this wherever you like in your code to limit the scope of your variables. So if you've got some specific equation and you need a whole heap of variables, but you don't want them afterwards, then you can add these braces so you can limit the scope and get rid of them once you're done so that it doesn't confuse you later on and it means that your code is safe. So let's have a look at these braces that I've introduced here. What I've done is I've introduced C just before these braces here. Now, what I'm trying to say there to the reader is that the equations relating to C are all in the braces below, and I still need C, but some of the variables that are going to be used to make C, I don't need afterwards. So I'm just going to limit the scope such that I don't need them afterwards. So inside of the first set of braces, what you'll see is this temp ABS, so the temp absolute value. We're performing the absolute value function here, and I only need this temporary variable for here to here, so I declare it within those braces that I created such that I don't have it anymore once I finish here. Okay, so it's going to exist only from here down to here. Now we've also got this if that has some scope, but I'm not declaring anything in here, so nothing is limited to the scope inside here. So if you have no declaration inside of two braces, then it's not limited to that scope. It'll be the outer scope where it's declared. Now, you'll notice that I do the same thing with X, and I create another temp ABS. Now, the question that you're probably asking yourself is, well, you're going to reuse that temp ABS. Why just get rid of the braces and reuse it? Well, the reason for this is that, firstly, it means that at this point I go back to 7. Okay, so if I have some code in between here, I don't have to worry about that temp ABS, and I can't accidentally put it into my equations, especially with some very complex equations. But the other reason is that this temp ABS and this one here, they're not dependent on each other. They have nothing to do with each other. And if, let's say, I've got a mistake in this bit of code, and I know it because my values are coming out wrong, then it can't be because of this temp ABS, because this is a brand new temp ABS. If I got rid of those braces and I reused temp ABS, let's say the value came out as 64 here, and that's causing the error down here, then I need to check all of this to find my logical error. But by creating a brand new one within this scope, if I'm having a problem just down here, I only need to check just down here. Or if I'm having a problem just here, I can just check here. And it means that I can still check this, and this might work where this might not. They're not dependent on each other, so I declare them in different scopes. And you might see that, well, you probably saw that in your assignment as well with the if and the else, where you declare similar things in different scope such that you isolate your errors. Okay. So from there, we. Oh, sorry, I missed the M. Sorry. So we also have M. Okay, so we're actually at 11 and 14. Okay. And you can see here that I'm introducing the last couple of variables. I print them out, and then I'm done with that, and then I return. So this is a bit of an introduction to scope. Now, there is one other thing you can do which we don't encourage, and we will look at this a little bit later in the subject, but basically you can also have variables declared outside of your functions or outside of main, so up here. And this is called global scope, and it means that you can access that variable anywhere. Now, this practice is sometimes useful for things like shared memory and multi-threading and stuff like that. But most of the time, you shouldn't have global variables. And for most of this subject, we won't be using them because we don't need them, and we want the added safety all the time. And we want the compiler to help us. We don't want to make our lives harder, and we don't want to make the readers' lives harder either. So we try and avoid global variables at all cost. And if you've seen in this subject, there are penalties for using global variables unnecessary, and there's really only 1 or 2 times when we'll actually need to use them in the subject. Okay, so if you do have a global variable, try and find a solution such that you don't need it unless it's absolutely necessary if you're doing something more advanced. Alright, so that's this scope video, and hopefully that helps you decide on where you're putting things. It improves readability, and it means that you know what you need at which stage and you're not using things early. And also, it helps the reader because they can read down the page and go, okay, blue dash exists from this point. I should only look for it after this point. I don't need to go back up and look for it. All right, that's it. Thank you very much.